The shape is the information. And if that sounds abstract, imagine walking into a building where every brick, beam, door, and window is still present, but someone has rearranged them at random. Nothing is missing. Yet the staircase leads into a wall, the doors open onto empty air, and the roof has lost the columns that held it up. You still have all the parts. You no longer have a building. That difference is the subject of Structured, a book I wrote about the hidden architecture beneath the world, the mind, and the machines we are now learning to direct. Hi, I am Leo. Welcome to Wiki for What? This is where we unpack the mind, machines, and hidden systems shaping the AI era through stories and models you can actually use. We usually look at the world as a collection of things: a person, a company, a fact, a neuron, an AI model, a tool. We count the things, name them, compare them, and assume that if we know enough about the pieces, we understand the whole. But a building teaches a harsher lesson. Bricks do not tell you where the rooms are. Beams do not tell you which loads they carry. A door means nothing until you know which spaces it connects. To understand the building, you need the plan, the positions, connections, dependencies, and boundaries that turn a pile of materials into a place that can stand. That plan gives us the book's working definition. For Structured, a structure is a set of nodes, plus the shape of the relations among them. The nodes are the parts. The relations tell you what connects, what depends, what carries weight, what can move, and what must remain separate. The first surprise is that changing those relations can change what the parts are able to do. Graphite and diamond are made of the same element, carbon. Their atoms are arranged differently, and one smudges across paper while the other forms a rigid crystal. In some butterfly wings, microscopic architecture selectively reflects wavelengths, so color is built from geometry rather than painted with pigment. The ingredient list does not contain the function by itself. Arrangement completes the explanation. You can hear the same principle. Sing a familiar melody in a different key, and every absolute note changes, yet the song survives. What survives includes its relative pitch pattern, its contour and intervals, along with its rhythm. Preserve those relations and the identity travels into a new material. Preserve the notes but scramble their order and timing, and the song disappears. The book follows this clue across scale. Branching networks move air through lungs, water through rivers, and resources through organizations. Simple local rules can produce flocking birds or a market pattern no participant designed. These systems are not identical, and a resemblance is not proof of one universal mechanism. What travels across domains is a question. When many parts interact, what higher-level behavior appears only because of the arrangement? One common name for that kind of behavior is emergence. It warns us that an inventory of parts may be necessary and still insufficient. This is the book's first signature line. The shape is the information. Think about our building again. A load-bearing wall and a partition wall may wear the same paint. One holds up the floor above. The other merely divides the kitchen from the dining room. Remove the second and you get an open plan. Remove the first without replacing its support and you get a crack, then a collapse. The visible material may look identical. The wall's position inside a network of forces makes it critical. The same question travels remarkably well. In a project, which task sits on the chain that controls the finish date? In a company, which person has become the only bridge between several teams? In an argument, which assumption supports every conclusion above it? In a software system, which service does everything else call? These are load-bearing walls. Their importance comes less from what they are than from where they sit. That gives you a useful first test, not a proof. Mentally remove a node and watch the consequences. Does the system reroute and recover? Then the node may be replaceable. Does everything downstream stop? Then you may have found something load-bearing. The effect can be delayed, hidden by redundancy, or visible only when several nodes fail together. But if you want reliability, this thought experiment shows you where to investigate, where to add a fallback, and where to proceed with care. So far, the architectural model feels natural because we are talking about physical things and engineered systems. The book then makes a harder move. It turns the blueprint toward your own mind. Most learning is like carrying a new chair into a finished room. You add a fact, a quote, or a technique, but the floor plan stays intact. You can retrieve the new information without changing how you first interpret a situation. Structured calls that knowledge useful furniture inside an existing building. Cognition is closer to renovation. A new experience refuses to fit the old room, so a doorway moves, two rooms merge, or a wall comes down. Afterward, the same event enters your mind by a different route. You do not merely possess a new answer. You notice different things and ask different questions. The developmental psychologist Jean Piaget gave names to these two moves. Assimilation fits the new into a schema you already have. Accommodation changes the schema because the new will not fit honestly. One is adding something to the plan, the other is redrawing the plan. And that explains a strange danger of expertise. A well-built mental structure makes you fast because it gives every new thing a likely room, but speed can become blindness. You may classify a genuinely new problem before you have looked at it. The wall that once helped you organize the world can become the wall blocking your view. Structured draws a loose philosophical parallel to the Mahayana concept Jayavarana, often translated as an obstruction to knowledge. The book renders it more freely as the obstacle of the known. What you already understand can prevent you from seeing what no longer fits. That phrase is the book's lens, not a standard translation or a scientific claim. Its warning is about the blind spots created by our own maps. Now move from the mind to an AI model. The common picture is a warehouse of facts with one answer stored in each box. The book offers a better picture, a vast control room filled with adjustable valves. Many parameters act as weights in transformations that amplify or suppress contributions. Others encode embeddings or set normalization gains and offsets. No single parameter is literally a valve. The valves are a metaphor for their joint effect across a huge network, where no single setting explains the model's ability. In a common gradient-based training loop, a model predicts, measures the miss, and nudges many parameters in directions that reduce the training loss. Over time, the system can capture regularities in its data. Compression is a useful analogy because the learned settings can represent reusable statistical patterns across many examples. But it is only an analogy. Capacity, generalization, and memorization can coexist. Research has shown that some language models, under suitable prompting, can reproduce specific training passages. So the honest claim is not that a model stores no facts. It is that its general competence is distributed across a learned configuration rather than filed in a neat cabinet. The brain and an AI model are not the same machine. A synapse is living biology, a parameter is a number. The analogy is structural, not literal. Both remind us that a connection can matter more as part of a pattern than as an isolated object. At this point, structure stops being something we only discover. We also design it. A story is not a bag of events. Change their order and you can turn a mystery into a tragedy. In the book's structural view, a program can be designed by decomposing a larger goal into modules, functions, and interfaces, then reassembling them. Likewise, the book models a workflow not as a list of capable tools, but as a system of contracts governing what each tool receives, what it returns, and what happens when it fails. In our building, an interface is a doorway. It hides the internal complexity of one room while specifying exactly how another room can connect to it. In software, structured data plays the same role. A schema says which fields exist, what kind of value belongs in each field, and what counts as invalid. Two systems can be built differently and still cooperate when they share a stable, compatible contract for both the shape and the meaning of what crosses their boundary. This is where structured thinking becomes more than neat organization. A tidy list can still represent a problem badly. Sometimes difficulty belongs not to the problem itself, but to the form in which you are holding it. The book's clearest example is the Smith chart. Radio engineers working on impedance matching faced painful complex number calculations. Philip H. Smith mapped the same relationships onto a disk, turning many calculations into graphical moves and readings along circles and arcs. The physics did not change, the representation did. That produces the second signature line. Change the structure and you change the difficulty. You have experienced this without calling it mathematics. A tangled project becomes manageable when you draw the dependencies. A vague ambition becomes actionable when you split it into small operations. A disagreement changes when you stop arranging it as two opposing positions and map the interests underneath. Re-representation does not guarantee an easy answer. It gives the answer a better chance to become visible. Then comes the AI age payoff. The book offers 3 useful arrangements for working with AI. In chat, the machine advises while you carry every answer into the world. With an agent, the machine can use tools, observe results, and correct its next step. In a workflow, repeated, validated work can become a system of agents, skills, commands, data, and quality checks connected into a durable process. These are design models, not a mandatory historical sequence. A workflow may be simpler than an agent, and it may not contain one at all. The person directing that process is not merely issuing prompts, they are reading a building. Which node is load-bearing? Which interface is leaking meaning? Where can an error cascade? What needs a fallback? Where must a human retain judgment? Imagine an automated publishing line. One node chooses a topic, another drafts, another checks facts, another makes the cover. Near the end sits a quality gate allowed to reject the entire run. That gate may produce nothing visible, yet it is a load-bearing wall. Remove it, and the workflow may appear to improve. It runs faster. It never complains. It also gains the ability to publish polished nonsense at scale. The book argues that as the cost of generating a first draft keeps falling, human value may concentrate at 2 ends, defining what should exist and deciding whether what was produced deserves to leave the building. Some of the work in the middle can be automated. That is the book's thesis, not a universal law of labor. But its practical warning remains. Purpose and accountability cannot simply be wished away. Structured finally compresses this way of seeing into a handful of moves. When a problem is too large, decompose it until the pieces can be handled. Find the load-bearing walls instead of distributing attention evenly. Read the interfaces, because failures often live in handoffs. Look for possible isomorphisms, the same relational shape appearing in different domains. Then test which constraints and meaning survive before borrowing a solution. Re-represent the problem when effort is rising but clarity is not. And when no map is available, traverse first. Take a small step, observe what it reveals, and let a useful map emerge from the path. Suppose you want to learn an unfamiliar field with AI. The unstructured approach is to ask broad questions, save dozens of answers, and mistake the growing archive for progress. The structural approach begins by decomposing the field into a few connected territories. It identifies the concepts that everything else depends on. It gives each research task a clear input and output, then checks the handoffs for missing assumptions. When an explanation stays confusing, it redraws the concept as a timeline, a causal map, or a comparison, and instead of waiting for a perfect curriculum, it builds one small project, follows the errors, and lets the map improve through traversal. The difference is not that one learner collected more information. One learner designed a system that could change their cognition. The building analogy has now done a lot of work, so here is where it stops. Buildings usually have deliberate architects, crisp blueprints, and parts with fairly clear boundaries. Natural systems can self-organize. Minds rewrite themselves while they are in use. Organizations contain people who react to the map once they see it. AI workflows change as their tools and environments change. In those systems, nodes can be fuzzy, relations can be hidden, and the blueprint may be an evolving hypothesis rather than a final plan. But the analogy leaves us with a durable habit. When something feels confusing, do not only ask what it is made of. Ask what connects to what. Ask where the load travels. Ask which boundary is failing. Ask whether the problem has been drawn in the wrong shape. Try it on one system you actually own, a project, a team, a learning plan, or an AI workflow. If you drew its blueprint today, which wall would surprise you by turning out to be load-bearing? Pick one idea from this episode and keep exploring it. The next useful tool, book, or decision will make more sense now. I am Leo. See you in the next one.